Welcome everyone to a practical guide to debugging your FME workflows with confidence. Today we are joined by our two lovely presenters, Skylar and Donald. I'll pass it off to each of them to introduce themselves briefly. So starting with Skylar.
Thanks, Elizabeth. Hello, everyone. I'm Skylar. I'm from the Flow support team. I've been translating for a bit over a year now, and it's my first webinar. So I'm very excited. And I'll pass it off to Donald.
Yeah, hi guys, I'm Donald. I've been on the technical support specialist side for FME Forum for since 2 years this week, actually, which is nice. And yeah, I've been doing webinars for about the past year, and yeah, looking forward to doing this one.
Fantastic, yeah. And super excited, Skylar, to have you join for your first ever webinar with us. I also want to note that we do have Sienna from our team joining on the back end today. So if you do have any questions during the webinar at all, do feel free to get those into the questions tab on the bottom right. We'll keep an eye on that as we go. Sienna and the team might be able to get to some during the webinar, and then we'll also have live time at the end to answer some questions live. You can keep using the chat on the bottom right as well to let us know where you're tuning in from. The audio button, the help button on the bottom left. So if you have any issues with audio or video during the webinar, you can click that button for 4 simple steps to take. And then lastly, I just want to point out the emoji react button. I've already seen some people use it. We love to see how people are feeling during the webinar and reacting to the content. Fuels our presenters as we go along here. So yeah, love to see it. Thanks, everyone. And then if you do wish to download the deck to follow along live, you can click the download button on the top right, and that will download the deck for you, and you'll have that as a separate PDF. Okay, so at this point, I will get our team on stage to turn off their webcams, just so we can save on some bandwidth for the remainder of the webinar here. And I will take us through our agenda briefly before we dive in. So we're going to be starting off today's webinar with a bit of an introduction from Donald into why troubleshooting matters, as well as an overview of troubleshooting in FME Form. We're going to have a demo that will showcase this as well, taking you through some common things that you might encounter. From there, Skylar is going to take us into troubleshooting in FME Flow. And then we will also have a section on how to ask questions that you might have in the future about troubleshooting. So on the FME community and some best practices there. Before we wrap up with a brief conclusion, some key takeaways from the webinar, and we'll leave you with some resources to help you get started on this topic today, as well as some next steps. And then, as I mentioned, we'll have that dedicated time for live questions at the end. I will go ahead and pass things over to Donald here for our intro.
Yeah, thanks, Elizabeth. So I'm just going to kick off with an introduction. So why does troubleshooting matter? If you use FME long enough, you'll run into problems. That's just the reality of working with real-world data. FME is incredibly flexible, so it processes almost anything until it can't, of course. The difference between a new and experienced user isn't avoiding issues, it's knowing how to troubleshoot them quickly and systematically. So let's just get a quick show of hands. You can use the thumbs up emoji down below. Have you ever thought of any of these while working in FME? You won't be alone because almost everybody has. I have, and I still do quite regularly. These are the moments where things technically work, but not the way you expect. Or FME throws an error without enough context to know what to fix. Or you know something's wrong, you just don't know where it started. What makes it frustrating isn't the problem itself. It's not knowing where to begin and worrying that every change might break something else. That's completely normal. FME is powerful and data-driven, so small changes can have big downstream effects. So today isn't just about fixing problems, it's about fixing them faster and preventing many of them in the first place. Most frustrating debugging comes from not knowing where to start. So we'll focus on simple, reliable troubleshooting techniques you can reuse in any FME workspace. So you're following a process and not guessing. Good troubleshooting helps you catch issues earlier, understand the root cause, and avoid fixing the same problem twice. Over time, that creates more resilient workspaces, ones that can handle changes in the data. It also builds confidence, especially with complex data or unfamiliar transformers. And ultimately, it's about less guessing and more delivering value with FME. So this webinar is going to talk about both FME form and flow. So let's just quickly familiarize ourselves with what Safe Software has to offer. So we offer flexible deployment options. FME form is the authoring environment where you build your data integration workflows. And for automation, FME flow can be deployed on premises or in private cloud. We also offer FME flow hosted, a fully managed deployment in AWS. So before we go any further, let's just name a few terms. So these are often used interchangeably, but they describe different parts of the process. So testing is about finding where things go wrong, running the workspace and narrowing down where the behavior changes. Troubleshooting is about asking why it went wrong, tracing the issue back to its root cause, whether that's the data, a transformer, or a broken assumption. And then debugging comes next. It's the act of fixing the issue once you understand it. And when we say something's gone off the rails, we simply mean the workspace isn't behaving as expected, often because the data changed, even if the workspace didn't. So let's jump into the details now. I'm going to walk through the troubleshooting in FME form. So most FME issues don't come out of nowhere. They tend to appear at predictable moments. A common one is during workbench authoring. When you're experimenting and trying different approaches, a bit of messiness is part of the process. Data quality is another big trigger. We assume data is clean until FME proves otherwise. Issues also show up when the data changes. A workspace that works perfectly on a small test data set can behave very differently at full scale. Moving between environments can introduce surprises as well, even if the workspace hasn't changed itself. And sometimes, unfortunately, things just break unexpectedly. That's when a structured troubleshooting approach keeps you moving forward and instead of guessing. So this diagram shows how I think about troubleshooting. I think of it more as a funnel and not a straight line. So at the top, the problem is vague. You just know something is wrong. So first, we want to reproduce the issue. If you can't make it happen again, you can't fix it confidently. Next, narrow down the focus. So reduce the data, isolate parts of the workspace, remove complexity. Make the problem smaller and easier to see. Then test variables, changing one thing at a time. This is where inspectors, loggers, and controlled inputs become powerful. After that, analyze the results, not just whether it worked, but what changed. Take note of what changed. Ideally, that leads you to the root cause. So this could be the data, a transformer, or you may have that assumption, but you are able to manage to narrow it down. And if you're still stuck, that's when contacting support becomes effective, because now you have a clear, reproducible case and not just a mystery. So here are some important FME form debugging steps. So start with the translation log. It tells you where to look. Check transformer names, rejected features, and warnings. And remember, no errors doesn't mean there are no problems. Use feature caching to see reality and not assumptions. Inspect rejected ports, check FME rejection code, and validate attributes and geometry. Look at the feature counts to see where data changes. Compare inputs and outputs to find where logic diverges. And then use the data preview to confirm the data is actually correct. Attributes, geometry, coordinate systems, and the final output can all be viewed with the data preview. So if a translation fails or the output looks wrong, go straight to the translation log. It's where I start, and it's very useful. It's your source of truth. In the log, expect to find the following details. You'll see errors, which stop the translation. You have warnings, which signals something unexpected. And then you have info, which provides context to the whole translation. If there's no error, always check the warnings. They often explain rejected features, truncation, coordinate system problems, or filtering. And then also remember, FME runs feature by feature, so the log won't mirror your workspace visually. Use timestamps to understand performance. These can be turned on in the FME options section. So if the total runtime is high, but FME processing time is low, the delay is likely external. So it could be, for example, a database. My ideal debugging checklist would include checking the translation log, look to see if there are any errors, then check for the warnings. Always scroll to the bottom of the log and check if the translation was successful or not, and then check timestamps to see underperforming issues. The answer is almost there, always in the log. If you master these two things, feature caching and feature counts, you'll find it easier to fix most issues much faster. With feature caching, turn it on and inspect transformers directly. Check for attribute changes, null geometry, coordinate shifts. And always look at the rejected ports. Features don't just vanish into thin air. It's important to check the FME rejection code as well. This will give a good indication of the issue. With feature counts, ask yourself, how many went in and how many came out? Unexpected changes in counts tell you where filtering, splitting, or logic changed the data. If something's wrong at the end, work backwards until the count stops making sense. That's usually where the issue is. And we have data preview, which is, I like to think of it as an early warning system. It lets you validate attributes and geometry visually and interactively. You can check the attributes. Are the values correct? Are numbers numeric? Are dates formatted properly? Confirm coordinate systems before spatial operations. So oftentimes misalignment is often a projection issue and not a logic issue. And then you can verify geometry types, points, lines, and polygons, and we match them with what the transformer expects. And preview the final output. Does this look correct? Are features missing? And do counts align? If it looks wrong in the preview, fix it now, not after you export it. You're just going to save yourself a whole lot of time. Let's show you a demo of these practices in action. When debugging an FME workspace, I rely on 4 things more than anything else: the translation log, feature caching, feature counts, and data preview. If you learn how to use these together, you can usually identify the problem without guessing, even in large or unfamiliar workspaces. So in this example, we have received a workspace that is causing a coworker issues, and it keeps producing errors. So let's get it started by just running our workspace. So the goal for the workspace is to combine street tree data and local neighborhood boundary data. As you can see, an error occurs with our workspace. So what should we do now? So I'm going to walk through some of the steps I'd take and hopefully make troubleshooting easier and more understandable for you. The first place I always look is the translation log. Before touching the canvas, the log tells me whether the workspace failed, if there are warnings, or if it ran successfully. It also importantly tells us where the problem first appeared. The translation log is vital to troubleshooting. So I'm not going to try and fix anything yet. I'm just going to read. I'm just trying to understand what went wrong. So most error messages tell me 3 key things: which transformer was involved, whether a feature was rejected, and whether the translation stopped because of that rejection. You'll find all this information within the translation log. Once I know I can reproduce the issue, I make sure feature caching is enabled. Caching is critical for debugging. It lets me inspect the data at each stage of the workspace without rerunning everything every time. So think of feature caching as taking snapshots of the data as it flows through the workspace. Without caching, debugging becomes slow and frustrating. With caching, it becomes a lot more systematic. Now, with feature caching turned on, let's rerun the workspace. As before, we expect the same errors. But now, with caching, we can see where the problem is. Along with the translation log, it helps confirm where our workspace fails and points to a specific transformer, so that's where I go to next. Instead of guessing what might be wrong upstream or downstream, I open the feature cache on that transformer, which is usually the rejected or evaluated port. This lets me see the actual features that cause the problem, not just an error message. If features are being rejected, I look for the FME rejection code. That attribute often explains exactly why a feature failed. So once I'm in the feature cache, we use the data preview window, which is located beside the translation log, as you can see. So this is where I validate my assumptions. Do the attributes I expect actually exist? Do they have values? Do they look the way the transformer expects? So in this case, the data preview shows that some features have a null value for the attribute being used by the JSON extractor. This should set off alarm bells immediately. It explains the rejection. The transformer can't extract data that isn't there. Now that we've narrowed down where exactly the error is, which is occurring in the JSON extractor, we need to apply a fix. So what we can do is simply add a tester transformer to filter out any rejected features. So let's add one in between the JSON extractor and our CSV data. We'll set our parameters to include the left value as geom and select the operator as attribute has a value. This will ensure that all our geom features have coordinates applied. After applying a fix, I rerun the workspace with caching still enabled. The first thing I always check is the translation log again. So with 0 errors and a successful translation, that suggests everything went as planned. But unfortunately, that doesn't mean the output is correct yet. Successful execution and correct output are two different things. So when we look at the clipper transformer, we're looking at clipping trees to the combined boundary of all neighborhoods. But judging from the results, it doesn't look like this function was executed correctly. This is where feature counts become essential. Feature counts show me how many features enter and exit each transformer. They tell me where features are being filtered, split, or lost. If the numbers don't match my expectations, I know exactly where to investigate next. In this workspace, the clipper's inside port has 0 features, while all features are coming out of the outside port. That tells me the spatial test is failing. Even though the workspace ran without errors, it doesn't matter. We know those results are wrong. It's always important to understand your end goal, and feature counts can help massively with this. When feature counts look wrong, I go back to the cache data. I inspect features on both sides of the spatial operation and use the data preview to compare them. Here, I'm able to check geometry, the extents, and coordinate systems to see if there are any standout differences between them. I can also use the record information window, as you can see here on the side, to look at the exposed attributes. This is where I discovered the real issue. The data sets are in different coordinate systems. So this suggests that the clipper is working correctly. It's just that the data simply doesn't overlap. And that's why we don't get any errors, but the results aren't what we need. Now that we understand where the problem lies, it's time to make one more fix. We'll add a reprojected transformer and change the coordinate system for our neighborhood. Once both streams are reprojected into the same coordinate system, I rerun the workspace. The feature counts immediately change, and features now appear on the inside port exactly as expected. The data preview confirms the results are spatially correct as well. Now that the workspace works perfectly, I just want to reiterate what we've just seen. So effective debugging in FME isn't about memorizing transformers. It's about using the right tools in the right order. The translation log tells you where to start. Feature caching lets you inspect what's really happening. Feature counts show you where data changes, and the data preview confirms whether the data is actually correct. If you're ever stuck debugging a workspace, don't add more transformers. Read the log, turn on caching, check the counts, and preview the data. There's no need to panic when you can have a systematic formula for debugging and troubleshooting when it comes to FME. So now that we've seen those axes in practice, what are some of the key takeaways? So debugging isn't about memorizing errors, it's about knowing where to look. Look at the log first, check for errors, look for warnings, and scroll to the bottom of the log. Read the log, basically. Then validate the flow. Did attributes change? Did the geometry change? Check your feature counts. If the numbers shift, your logic shifted. And finish with the data preview. Does it look the way you expected? And if you're still struggling and stuck, you're not on your own. For bugs and installation issues, licensing problems, or production blockers, submit a support ticket. To speed things up, include the FME version, the sample data, workspace, and clear reproduction steps, if possible. Reproducible issues get resolved faster. And for how do I questions or best practices, head to the FME community. You'll often get quick answers from other users or from safe staff, but I'll speak more about the community later. Now that we've covered the best practices for Form, I'll hand it over to Skylar, who will go through the flow side.
Thanks, Donald. So let's move into FME flow, where things can feel a little bit more overwhelming at first. FME flow adds a lot of power, automation, schedule, web connection, but it also introduces a few more moving parts. In this section, we're not going to deep dive into edge cases. Instead, we'll focus on how to approach flow issues, where to look first, and what tools are available to help you troubleshoot with confidence. Before we go any further, there's just one thing I want to point out. If something doesn't work in FME form, it's not going to magically work in FME flow. So flow troubleshooting always starts by making sure the workspace logic and data behave as expected in Workbench. Use the tools Donald mentioned in the form debugging session. Once that foundation is solid, flow becomes more easier to reason about. So when something goes wrong in flow, the hardest part is often just knowing where to start. Rather than guessing, we'll walk through a simple mindset. First, clearly identify what failed. Look at the message flow gives you. And finally, use the log to get more context, which will lead us to the FME flow debugging steps we recommend. At a high level, flow troubleshooting usually follows a predictable path. You start with logs, then move outwards to system-level tools if needed. And finally, check known resources to see whether you're hitting something that is already documented. We'll briefly introduce each of these steps so you know what exists and when to use it, even if you don't need to use all of them every day. So one of the most common questions with flow is simply, where are the logs? FME flow actually provides logs related to many features, including workspace, automation, schedules, or some new features like data virtualization. Those logs can be found in the resources section on the left-hand side of the flow user interface, as shown in the screenshot. You could also find FME flow logs from the system share location, which you define when first installing FME flow. So now we get the job logs, how to read FME flow logs. Once you open a FME flow log, the next question is, what are we actually looking for? So the key thing to remember is that you don't need to understand every single line. Logs can look busy, but we're actually scanning for a few specific clues. First, look for error messages. These are actually clearly marked and often point directly to what failed. Next, check for warnings near the point of failure. Sometimes the real cause appears a few lines before the actual error. And also watch for things like missing paths, broken connections, or permission issues. In Flow specifically, environment differences can show up in the logs like this way. And finally, pay attention to the timestamp. If multiple jobs are running, the timestamps help you to focus on the exact moment your issue occurred. So rather than reading top to bottom, think of it as scanning strategically. The error message and warning filter will also help you read the log, as shown on the screenshot on the right-hand side. So in some cases, you may need more detail than the standard log provide. FME Flow also supports debug logging, which gives deeper insight into what's happening behind the scenes. However, we only recommend enabling log debug when you're stuck, since it may impact job performance and provide a bit too much additional information. So other than logs, it's a great idea to take advantage of system tools, because not every flow issue is about a workspace or flow itself. Sometimes it's about the environment flow is running in. System level tools like operating system monitors or browser tools can help answer questions like, is flow under heavy load? Are requests failing because they've reached flow? Is something external affecting behavior? And we'll discuss some of them in more detail. So first is the service. FME Flow runs as a collection of services and background processes. So when something isn't working as expected, one of the first place to check is the service panel on the machine where FME Flow is installed. You can access this through Task Manager or go to Services directly. Once you're there, look for FME services. Typically, you'll see things like FME Flow application server, core, database, and engines. The first thing to check is service status. Are they running? If one of them is stopped, that could immediately explain the issue sometimes. And the second thing to check is the account used to run those services. Are they running under a local system or a specific service account? If FME need access to network shares, databases, or other external resources, the service account permission matter a lot. So next, we're going to talk about a bit about developer tools. For browser-based issues, modern developer tools can provide helpful context. They're especially helpful for narrowing down network-related issues. For example, if something in the UI isn't loading properly, you can open the network tab and see exactly which requests are being made and which ones are failing. You can also view detailed requests and response information. This means you can inspect the full URL, headers, payload, status code, and the service response message. Often the UI may show a generic error, but the response body will contain a much more specific explanation. One important thing to emphasize before we wrap up this section is that you're not expected to troubleshoot FME Flow on your own. FME offers plenty of resources to help you debug and move forward. So one of the helpful resources we have is the known issue article. SAFE maintains a known issue article that documents issues we're already aware of in both FME form and Flow. Often with explanations and available workarounds. This is one of the best places to check early on, especially if you're seeing a specific error message or unexpected behavior after an upgrade. A quick tip when using no issue article, first use filters to narrow down by product and version you're using. Second, search by error message or feature name. And Last, if there's any workaround list, test it in your environment to see if that works. This can quickly tell you whether what you're seeing is a known limitation or something new. So right now we're going to have a quick demo. In this demo, I'm going to walk through a very common troubleshooting scenario in FME. A workspace runs successfully in form, but fails when executed in FME flow. We will confirm the workspaces work in FME form first, as we discussed, and then we run a workspace in FME flow. We'll review the job log and investigate the error. Eventually, we'll fix the issue and finally explain why this happened. So here we have the demo video available. May take a few seconds to load. And as we mentioned before, we always want to confirm that a workspace works in FME form before publishing to FME flow. So here is the workspace in FME form. The workflow is very simple. An Excel reader that calls a sample Excel file, and a tester transformer to filter out all the status that are not active, an attribute manager to add a verify flag for active status, and finally, a CSV writer. There's nothing complex here. It reads Excel file, filter records, modify attribute, and writes out the CSV. Now we'll run it locally in FME form to see if that works first. So as you can see, before running in the workspace, we're asked to put 2 user parameters. For the Excel file input, we'll use a local directory, which is a C drive. And for the CSV output, we'll use a UNC path, a network resource. And let's give it a run first. Hopefully that will work. And as you can see here, it runs successfully. So we can see feature successfully read, workspace logic is valid, reader works, transformers work, and the writer works. We confirm that the workspace works in form. Now is the important part. We have to verify if that works in flow. So now let's publish to FME flow. And we'll just use the same workspace, use job submitter, and publish to flow. So we can see we successfully get a flow URL. Let's just click it, and that will lead us to flow UI. Here I have my workspace published. Before I run it, you can see I have 2 parameters, which are the same paths I'm using in FME form. So both Excel and CSV. Let's give it a run and see if that works. We usually just pray it's going to work now, but unfortunately, it's a troubleshooting demo. We're not surprised by the failure. This page gives us some general error message of the failure, which doesn't look too scary, hopefully. So now let's have a look at the job log file. And before we scroll down, let me briefly explain what a job log shows at the beginning. It contains some general information, including what version was the workspace last saved, as well as the FME flow build, and the machine host name can be very important as well. And finally, the operating system, whether things work together with FME flow. We don't need to worry too much about the information now, but that could be very helpful in further troubleshooting processes. And now let's scroll down to the log to check the specific error messages. And now we found a key error. It says Excel reader failed to open file, the same Excel file we use in form for reading. Please ensure that the file exists and you have sufficient privilege to read it. So let's break it down. First, the Excel reader is trying to open an Excel file at this path. FME flow is saying either the file doesn't exist or it doesn't have permission to access it. So that error message leads us to the Excel file. We could see that we use the same file path in form and flow. However, it only works in form, which means the path can be found in the FME form machine. Now we may have realized that FME form is installed on my local machine, whereas FME flow could be installed on a different server machine. So when I ran the workspace in Flow, it attempted to access the local C drive directory in my local machine where form was installed. It doesn't have access to my personal download folder in that directory. So from Flow machine's perspective, it just doesn't exist. So let's try to fix it properly. Instead of referencing a local path from my laptop, I'll just upload the Excel file again through the Flow UI, and I'll upload the same Excel file. So right now, let's see if that works. Let's give it a run again. And fingers crossed again. Now we can see the job ran successfully and the error message disappeared. We can see there's still some warning messages, but those are not impacting the result and it's safe to ignore now. The issue was fixed, but before we wrap up the demo, let's confirm the root cause and see where FME form and flow were installed by checking the form translation log and FME flow job log again. So here's a flow job log. We can see that FME flow was installed in the machine called Sky 25796, not the best name. And we'll also double check in our form translation log. So let's scroll up to the top and we could see that FME form was installed in a different machine, which is my local machine. That has a unique name, I guess. So that's the end of demo. And after that, we'll just do a few key points to summarize the key takeaway. So just keep that in mind when you troubleshoot with FME. First, let the error message help you. In the demo example, we learned that avoid using local file paths from your authoring machine when running workspaces in FME Flow. Instead, we can use Flow resources, which is a shared file system in Flow or any shared network locations, to be honest. Second, always compare the form log with the flow log, which was what we did before. Differences in environment, file paths, permissions, or published parameters can all cause issues. And finally, check whether the issue has been documented already. Take a look at the known issue articles for your version and search for FME Community. There's a good chance someone else has run into the same thing and you may find a workaround or solution right away. So now Donna will talk more about how to take advantage of FME Community, and I'll pass it to you, Donald.
Yeah, thanks, Skylar. Some great tips for the flow side there. So I just want to talk about the FME community now. It's extremely useful and resourceful when it comes to troubleshooting and debugging, and I'd recommend all users, whether you're new or you're an expert, to use it. It's just so valuable. So the FME community is where users connect and share knowledge. You can ask questions, search past answers, and learn best practices from real-world examples. Responses come from customers, partners, and safe staff. It's also full of tutorials, articles, and practical tips. So if you use FME often, make the community a regular stop. If you want fast answers in the community, here's some tips for posting a good question. So search first and link related posts if they're close. People may have similar issues in the past. You mightn't be the first person to come across this issue. Use a specific title and be clear about your goal, what you've tried, and what's failing. It's always important to include the following: the FME product, the version, and the operating system. If you can, add some logs or screenshots if relevant, and also upload a small sample workspace if possible. Use the tags. These are extremely important. Experts follow tags, so good tagging increases visibility. If you tag, an expert might jump onto that question and might be able to answer it a lot quicker than if you don't use the tags. And when your issue is solved, mark the best answer. That helps future users and keeps the community clean and searchable. So a good answer matters as much as a good question. Understand the problem first. Ask clarifying questions if needed. Link related posts or documentation to strengthen your response. And if possible, share a small sample workspace. Examples make solutions clearer. And don't just give the fix, explain the reasoning. That's what helps others learn. Clear, structured educational answers benefit everybody. For any user, no matter your level of expertise, I'd recommend using the community. The more it grows, the better it becomes. So that wraps up my section on the community. Be sure to use it, but I'll hand it back over to Skylar now for the conclusion.
Thanks, Donald. Hopefully you'll be able to get something from the webinar and be able to debug FME smarter after this. So to wrap things up, I will like to leave you with a few key takeaways. Excuse me. First, troubleshooting is a skill. The more you practice, the faster and more intuitive it becomes. Second, logs are your best friend. Like whenever something isn't working as expected, start with the logs. They often tell you exactly where things went wrong, or at least, point you to the right direction. And third, use small, repeatable tests. Test one thing at a time. This saves lots of time while introducing new issues while you're trying to fix another, which is a common thing we kind of do all the time. And also check existing resources before diving too deep. Documentation, community posts, chances are something, encounter something similar before. And finally, if you come across something that could make FME better, submit a product idea. Your feedback directly helps shape the product, and many improvements starts from the idea just like yours. So thanks and happy troubleshooting. Now I will pass it off to Elizabeth to talk more about FME and safe software.
Fantastic. Thank you, Skylar and Donald both. That was excellent. Yeah, we hope you got a lot out of today's material. Before we wrap up with our question period, which, by the way, just a final reminder, we're just a few minutes out. So if you do have any other questions top of mind, please just get those into the questions tab. But in the meantime, I'll take us through some resources and a little bit about us here at SAFE if you are newer to the company. So we work with over 25,000 organizations around the world, over 200,000 users worldwide, working with over 140 different partners. So we've been in the data integration game for over 30 years now. I think we're edging towards more like 32. So I almost need to update this graphic here. FME is the only all data, any AI platform. We work with all data velocities, locations, types, and any AI technology. In terms of resources to help you get started with today's topic, Skylar and Donald have put together this curated list here, both for FME Form and FME Flow. As a reminder, you are welcome to download the deck with that download button on the top right, and then you can actually navigate through all these links directly as you go. I won't spam the chat with all 10 of them, but yeah, great resource here with this slide, different tools that you can use. Like Skylar and Donald have both mentioned, you aren't alone. We have lots of resources and help available to you here with troubleshooting. At SAFE, we're all about free resources. We are home to the FME Academy, which is home to instructor-led training free of charge. And then I'll also highlight that our webinars are also available on demand, and lots upcoming that have recently been posted. So check those out, safe.com/webinars. In terms of next steps, if you are newer to FME, I'd also recommend the FME Accelerator course. It's 90 minutes free of charge. I took the course myself and found it to be a great place to get started learning the basics of FME. And then for any user or potential future user, feel free to get in touch with us, info@safe.com. We'd love to help you get started with anything data. that you might be wondering about. If you are a member of our FME community, we also have a badge code you can redeem here as a thank you for joining us today. If you'd like to redeem those codes, I will drop that in the chat here as well. And if you aren't a member of the FME community, we'd highly encourage you to check it out. It's a great place to network with both other FME users alike, as well as FME experts, and our team hangs out in there as well. It's a great forum opportunity. Like Donald and Skylar mentioned, if you have a question, chances are someone might have asked that exact same question before, so it's a great resource. All right, with that, I will invite Donald, Skylar, and Sienna if she'd like to join us on stage here, and we can take a look through the questions together. I think we've gotten a couple more new ones recently come in here.
Yeah, okay. I did see a question by Randy. He just talks about troubleshooting with ARC objects and other Esri errors. I did link a response to Randy, an article about just general Esri ArcGIS troubleshooting guides. I'd recommend to look at that page because it has a link to, I'd say, probably about 20 other articles, all to do with Esri products. So you might come across something very specific to you. So I'd recommend reviewing that. That's probably the best place to start. But I guess that's just a general overview for FME, that there are so many articles available that you could most likely search FME troubleshooting and then a specific word. Most likely something will come up, whether it be on the community or just through our own articles on our website as well.
To add on to that, I also, when troubleshooting ArcGIS Online and portal stuff in specific, oftentimes, because you're making web requests, like maybe you're making too many at a time, and then you can kind of come into some inconsistency. So what I like to do is there's a parameter that you can find in the reader and the writer. You can change to limit the amount of data you're sending at once, and that tends to improve stability. Also, when I get ARC objects errors, I just Google them right away, hope that someone else has come across it, and oftentimes they'll come across our community or the Esri community as well.
Yeah, 100%. And actually, Randy follows up, so I'll just answer this live. So when he submits a ticket, he often can't share any of the data or any of the workspaces, which is totally fine. That happens quite often, and we don't expect everybody to be able to share. So I guess the best practice for this would just be to break down step by step what the issue is. If possible, you can always look for sample data online. There's plenty of websites out there that you could pull from. But as long as you kind of have just a breakdown of what's expected and what's happening, it should be able to help us. And if you have any screenshots included, that will also help. But we don't expect you to be able to share any of the data if it's not possible, because we know everybody has their own permissions with their job. So as long as it's a strong kind of articulated response or question, it should be enough for us to be able to kind of start from there and ask any more questions if needed.
This is an interesting one. So they're asking if SAFE does unit testing. So SAFE has a very large test suite. And so when a developer makes changes to our code, it gets sent to a test suite, and basically every night test suite runs with a bunch of workspaces in it to make sure that their changes don't affect other things downstream.
I would like to just quickly add to Sienna's answer to Dick's question on the filter on successful job logs, with errors. I'm also not aware of that, but just in case, you're thinking about like the filter of error message and warnings, we did briefly kind of show that in a screenshot. Is not a most obvious place, but in this slide on the top right corner, we do have like a error message and warning filter. If that's what you mean, but if you're thinking about like job log level instead of like specific job, it may be a great idea to submit idea. But just in case that's what you were thinking for a specific job log, that's the place to go.
Nice.
Awesome.
I do see Mark has a question. I'm not entirely sure off the top of my head. Sienna, you might be able to answer this. I would think
Honestly,
maybe the string replacer would possibly work.
yeah, you could look at it, especially now that the string replacer allows you to do multiple replacements. You could probably look up some regex to help you with that. I bet someone out there probably has a custom transformer, something like with a Python library to remove those extra characters, but I can't think of anything off the top of my head.
Yeah, you might just have to use multiple transformers as well just to get through the process, but it probably is doable. Just might have to follow up on that question afterward.
Is there a way to monitor the queue in FME flow for backed/zombie jobs? I think to do this, you'd probably want to use the REST API and just take a look if jobs are consistently queuing. Also, if you have something like a schedule, there is an option to not allow, like if a job is currently running, for new jobs to be submitted to kind of create that long queue. So there's something to look into there too. Once you do that, the job gets canceled, and then you can send yourself an email alerting you, hey, this job was canceled, look into it. So just something to look into. I don't know, Skylar, you have anything to add there?
Yeah, that's a great point, Sienna. I think you covered the most helpful part, like REST API is probably the most direct way. I just want to add, if you happen to have multiple engine available, it may be a good idea to, configure the job routing rules and also the engine assignment rules to, better accommodate what you want to achieve to which queue for which job, and that may make it slightly easier if you have that zombie jobs. That may be helpful as well.
Awesome. Just doing a final scan through. I think we've gotten to most, if not all, the questions now. I see a question from Pierre. Team, is that one that we can address on stage today, or maybe one to follow up on?
I was just reading that over. So is there a quick guide for token creation in FME flow? We'll have to look into that. Maybe if you could follow up and send us a little more details of what you're looking for. So are you just curious about what tokens currently exist in FME flow and maybe disabling them if they're not in use? Like what tokens are you thinking? Are you thinking about like the ones you're creating for like REST APIs or your flow apps? Maybe submit a support case and just add a little more detail into what you're thinking of, and we can get back to you on that. I don't know, Skylar, if you have anything else to add on it.
Yeah, thanks, Sienna. I don't think I have any additional thought on that. Yeah, as you mentioned, maybe submit a support ticket if you have like detailed questions, and we can grab your ticket from there.
Perfect. Okay, I think that's gotten to all the questions there. Just maybe final call to the panel team. Am I missing any that you've seen?
No, I don't believe so.
Okay. Well, perfect timing. We're just almost at the top of the hour. So huge thank you to everyone for joining us today. We really appreciate your time. We hope you got a lot of value out of today's webinar. And to Donald and Skylar as well, thanks for all your time in preparing and presenting today's content. Special shout out to Skylar on her first ever webinar with us at SAFE. Amazing job. And Sienna, thanks for all your help on questions and content planning as well. Thanks everyone, and we hope you have a great rest of your days ahead. If you do have a moment to fill out our webinar survey, I dropped the link in the chat a moment ago. We really appreciate any feedback. It's just a couple multiple choice questions there. Thanks everyone, and bye for now. We'll see you on the next one.